Okay, welcome to Logic Pro X tutorials, everyone. This channel brings you new videos every week, so please subscribe to the channel and hit the bell icon to stay tuned for more videos. So today the topic we are going to discuss is how not to overload the system. So the first thing that you got to do is go to the settings, audio, and change the IO buffer size. So the lesser you go, the lesser load the computer takes. So the more load the computer has to put in. So the good practice is to keep 256 and start recording and producing. And still, if you see a delay and latency in your workflow and in the recording, you have to change it to lower settings and see what comes up. It's a very good practice that you put it back to 1024 because the computer is only doing monitoring. That is, it's just having playback, and it doesn't have to send the signal through the interface and bring it back to the system. So in the recording process, the audio from outside or from the guitar mics are being fed into the interface and it comes to the computer. So it's all done by the computer's CPU. That's where the latency happens usually. If you're not recording and if you're just playback, if your aim is just mixing, the setting is best by placing the IO buffer at 1024. Next, we gotta check the low latency mode. So the low latency mode is in the top right corner over here. So if you press this and record all the plugins that is taking up too much load, Logic Pro X goes and disables it, and the sense a lot of features gets disabled. Initially, I would recommend you to go and change the setting of the IO buffer to the lowest value when recording, and as well as clicking the low latency mode. And once you have done recording, when you start mixing, you can switch off the low latency mode and you can go back to the IO buffer and change it to 1024. While producing also, when you add a lot of plugins, the UAD plugins actually doesn't take any load. It has a different processor by its own. So if you have UAD satellite, the satellite will take the processing power, so you don't have to think about UAD plugins inside Logic and the plugins that has been installed into the component folders, the Waves plugin and every other plugin. So when you load all these plugins, even while mixing, you will get a high CPU rate. So you can always monitor your CPU and the disk IO over here. The next option that you have is to freeze the track. This is the button to click and freeze the track. If you don't see this option, go to track header components and check freeze. Another practice that you could do is you can convert this audio to MIDI by clicking Ctrl P. And if you have freezed the track, it'll ask you to unfreeze it. Now the computer takes lower load to process, to play back the audio rather than MIDI. In the case of MIDI, the computer has to first recognize the notes of the MIDI notes that you have played in, and it has to go to the plugins and the instruments. And if you add up each instruments in each tracks, the MIDI conversion to audio is always happening. So it's always a good practice. Once you have set the melody and the codes, it's good that you convert it to audio. The next thing is not to add all the effects in the single channel. Always keep a practice of adding effects in a bus. So if you have a reverb, distortion plugin, or adding a little bite to the track, you can add these effects and most of the effects in each buses so that you can add the same effect for every track and not keep adding each effect in every track itself. So these buzzes will be added with effects that you need and delay, the reverb, the distortion, and for parallel compression you can add another compressor and squash the signal to the max. So this practice also gives the computer lesser load. The only problem with sending all the signals to the bus is it might cause an artifact kind of sound, because you have two same sounds coming out of two track, and one track doesn't have the effects and the same sound comes from another effect track. And just make sure that you don't create an artifact when you use. But always the theory is use lesser plugins and don't overuse the plugins. It's all about knowing each parameters of each plugins. So the plugins and the parameters that you change is all same in analog and in digital realm. It's all about using the parameters right. And if you know what each does, you can pretty much produce in any DAW because you know all the parameters. And once you know all the parameters, the summing up of additional plugins, just the sake of adding plugins, will decrease, and you know specifically what to do. So before adding a plugin, make sure it's actually needed and it's not added because you think that the plugin is great, but you know that that plugin is going to add that particular kind of effect, and you exactly know that even before you add that plugin, you know which parameter is going to bring that effect which you intended. So experiment with all the plugins when you have free time and learn each plugin's parameters and dial in the right amount which you think the track really wants. So hope you guys liked this video. Thank you for watching. Please subscribe to the video if you haven't. So thank you for watching. Hit the bell icon. See you in the next video. Thank you.